Jason Hayes with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy joining us here. And this is something he's been talking about for quite some time and writing about electric vehicles. Hello, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
The headlines coming out now is that Ford Motor Company is postponing about $12 billion in EV investments as buyers are becoming more cautious. People are just not as sold, it appears, on EVs.
That's exactly right. People are dealing with things like not only the higher costs of EVs, where EVs, the most recent numbers suggest that the average price of an EV is around $55,000, whereas the average price of an internal combustion engine vehicle is probably more like $35,000, $40,000. So they're quite a bit more expensive to start off with, even with the $7,000 to $10,000 in subsidies that you can get from the feds and the state. Even with those subsidies, it still is more expensive. So cost first. Then there's also reliability issues. Something that is widely publicized in the media is called range anxiety. So people are concerned that they get in their vehicle and they start driving. Will they be able to find a charger? Well, they're not sure. So if you look, there have been stories written on the Wall Street Journal and other media outlets explaining that when people take a long trip, they tend to spend as much or more time charging than they do driving or that sort of thing. So when you get to the chargers, you may not be able to access the charger or you get stuck in a line. There was a recent kind of ironic story about former Governor Granholm, now Secretary of Energy Granholm, having people on her staff park internal combustion engine vehicles in the charging stalls to block people from getting into the charger so that when she passed by in her EV motorcade, she would be able to just immediately pull in and charge. So if you're a regular person like you or me, we have to wait in line for the charger. So if you're the Secretary of Energy, you get people to kind of hold your spot for you. But that's part of the problem with all of this technology is the costs, the range anxiety, and then also there's a lot of increasing research about, are they actually protecting the environment? There's issues associated with just how much mining are we going to have to do to get the critical minerals that we need to build the batteries. Cobalt comes from Democratic Republic of the Congo. And if you read books like Cobalt Red, you learn that actually we're sending 6, 7-year-old kids into the ground to get this cobalt that we need to make reliable batteries that won't catch on fire and that we can actually trust to charge. You need the cobalt to do that. Just this morning, one of our coworkers sent me an article that said actually the problem that existed with solar panels, that slave labor is being used in China to build solar panels, that actually also applies to EVs as well. So I think it was in the Washington Post that there was an article about the Uyghurs and the Kazakhs that have been imprisoned by the Chinese government are now also being used to build EV components. So there's just a string of problems that we're finding that exist associated with these EVs. And so more and more people are questioning, is this really all that good of an idea? And you're seeing the outfall from like GM and Ford and others they're starting to pull back.
Yeah, and the government subsidies, the money the government is throwing at these auto companies, millions, billions of dollars. But despite that, the market forces are in control. It's the people who are deciding. They're not sold on it. And despite all of this money going at it, people are still not buying them. So that would make the automakers think, what's going on? Maybe people really aren't ready on a full scale.
Yes. So despite what certain senators in Lansing may say, that people are claiming that this isn't market driven, that it's mandated. And it was Senator McMorrow that said, if you're saying this isn't, or this is government mandated, then you're lying. Okay, well, it actually is government mandated. I'll take the risk of being called a liar, because when you look at the stories you pointed out, Ford is pausing on $12 billion in planned investment. I also read this morning GM and Honda are pulling back and actually scrapping a $5 billion partnership that they had put together and had been working on for over a year, because they planned to be able to compete with Tesla. So those two, GM and Honda, were going to, through that partnership, find a way to reduce costs and become more competitive and to be able to outdo Tesla. Okay, well, they're scrapping that partnership. And it's all based in the reality that customers are not buying these vehicles. So we keep hearing about this much vaunted transition, and everybody's going to go for EVs because they're so clean. Well, they're not actually. They're so reliable. Well, they're not actually. They're so affordable. Well, they're not actually. And when people buy cars, they buy cars pretty much, they want something that meets their needs, that fits their family, and that they can rely on. They know it's going to work when they need it. Okay, well, you may be able to fit a lot of people into an EV, but you can't afford it, or it's way more expensive, and you can't rely on it to get you where you're going. Now, some people will push back. I've had people email me and say, oh, I love my Tesla. My Tesla is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, maybe a few versions of EVs work for a very limited portion of the population, tends to work for people who drive very short distances, work in a city, and they commute back and forth to work, that sort of thing. If you have a very specific need, then sure, they might be able to fit it. But for the average person who's driving, 50, 100 miles or something like that, it's not working. And the cost, the lack of reliability, and now the environmental impacts associated with them is really starting to hit home, which is why you're seeing the big companies say, you know what, we're building a lot of them, but they're sitting on the lots and people are not investing in them.
And the reality is now setting in, something you've been talking about for years. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I really appreciate you, taking the time, and we will stay updated on this. You can go to Mackinac.org. Jason Hayes, Director of Energy and Environmental Policy. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Dave.